Welcome back to another episode of The Culture Bit. I'm your host, Alan Helm. The following interview is with Senator Cynthia Lummis. Senator Lummis represents Wyoming in the U.S. Senate and is one of the most vocal advocates for Bitcoin and financial innovation on Capitol Hill. She is a lifelong champion of fiscal responsibility and has worked tirelessly to integrate Bitcoin into U.S. economic policy, including proposing the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve to strengthen national financial stability. She was recently appointed as the chair of the Senate Banking Subcommittee on Digital Assets. Senator Lummis is shaping legislation that could define Bitcoin's role in the future of the U.S. economy. She has consistently pushed for bipartisan regulatory clarity and is a driving force behind Bitcoin's friendly policies in Washington. At Bitcoin 2025, she's set to share the latest on Bitcoin's role in U.S. reserves, financial policy, and regulatory advancements. Our discussion today covered all those topics and gave a little bit of insights into what she will be discussing. A friendly reminder, for those of you who have not secured your Bitcoin 2025 tickets just yet, prices increase this Friday. We have a Valentine's Day limited time offer where you can buy one ticket, get 50% off with the code BTCBAY. That is BTCBAE at checkout. Use code BTCBAY to secure that offer. Now to today's discussion. So Senator Lummis, welcome back to the Culture Bit. Last time we spoke was at Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville, right before you went on stage to announce the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. Obviously, a lot has happened since that time back in July of last year. Excited to catch up with you on all things Bitcoin policy and maybe some insights as to what you're going to be speaking on at Bitcoin 2025. For anybody who missed that interview, it'll be linked down in the description below. But please make sure to check it out. It would be a great refresher on all things Bitcoin Strategic Reserve and the Bitcoin Act. So let's kick things off here. Want to talk from your POV on all things that have happened since Nashville. Obviously, you guys put forward the Bitcoin Act. You've also stepped in as digital commerce chair. That's correct. Awesome. Yeah, tell me about everything that's happened since Nashville in July, everything with the Bitcoin Act.
Well, Alan, it's so great to be with you again, and I appreciate all you do to educate and inform and get advocates on board for Bitcoin. It's important that your work move forward in a real aggressive and positive manner, and you're doing that beautifully. So thanks for that. So it was a big surprise to me because President Trump went on the stage before me at Bitcoin 2024. I did not know that he was going to announce his support for a Bitcoin strategic reserve in his remarks. Now, we had kicked around before his remarks that idea. He had a copy of my bill, but I didn't know if it resonated with him. I didn't know if he was thinking along the same lines. So I was so delighted. I can't even describe how pleased I was that he supported it. And he was much more supportive than I expected. He was also much more informed than I suspected. So he obviously has a background and is surrounding himself with people who have backgrounds in Bitcoin. So that was new to me, and I couldn't have been more delighted. He has continued consistently to support Bitcoin, the notion of a strategic reserve, and now even has added the notion of a sovereign wealth fund, which I'm extremely pleased about. So what we saw a taste of at Bitcoin 2024 is now turning into policy. Which is every policymaker's dream. I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to take over a new subcommittee on digital assets in the Senate Banking Committee. There's never been one before, but of course, Alan, as you know, we have finally risen to the point where digital assets deserve this kind of attention. So I couldn't be more pleased with my banking committee chairman, Tim Scott. He's embracing this technology, seeing the advantages to underbanked communities and non-banked communities in particular. And he has a tremendous gift for taking complex topics and distilling them down for everyone to understand. And that's really a gift that he brings to this discussion. In other words, the personnel are in place to really make things happen. The president appointed a digital asset czar type position in the White House. The new Treasury Secretary is conversant in digital asset issues. And so is the vice president. So are the people that he's appointing to Treasury adjacent positions. You mentioned Howard Lutnick. Howard's fabulous. He's working with the president on the idea of a strategic reserve as well as a sovereign wealth fund. So the right people are in the right places to keep this issue front and center. Now, here's what I understand from my colleagues in the Senate. So I'm busy communicating with you, Alan, and other people in the Bitcoin space that are really excited about a strategic Bitcoin reserve. I am also really excited about a strategic Bitcoin reserve. So it took some of my colleagues here in the Senate coming to me and saying, we still don't understand this asset. We're not ready to help you pass a strategic Bitcoin reserve. We need more education from you, meaning me. So that was a good wake-up call for me. So here's what we're doing. We're starting with a stablecoin bill because that was kicked around a lot during the last Congress. We're going to move quickly on that. It'll probably be a standalone bill. We'll try to get the 60 votes in the Senate that's necessary to bring a bill to a vote. That means it has to be bipartisan. We think we can do that. We couldn't have done that last year, but now we think we're there. So we're moving that first. We need to score a win to get some momentum in the digital asset space. That's how we see we can do it first. Then we're moving to market structure, which is determining statutorily what is a commodity and what is a security, and making sure that the regulatory framework is clear and well understood. Right now, as you know, for assets that are securities, the Securities Exchange Commission has slapped them with enforcement actions rather than clear guidance on how to comply with the law. It's cost them tens of millions of dollars in legal fees and gotten them nowhere. So we need to make it clear for everyone, whether it's Bitcoiners over on the Commodity Futures Trading Commission side or non-Bitcoiners whose asset falls into the securities space, to make it clear on how they can meet their requirements of their regulator. There's a great woman who is a commissioner at the SEC, Hester Peirce. Some of you probably know of Hester. She's knowledgeable and favorable towards digital assets, so she will be fair. Whereas before we could not get fairness, not at the Fed, not at the FDIC, not at the White House, not at the Office of Comptroller of the Currency. It didn't matter where we turned. They were all pushing against all digital assets. And Alan, they've lumped them all in the same space. That's always been another problem. You know, there's Bitcoin and there's everything else. And they were all getting painted with the same brush. So it was very hard to get any recognition of not only the differences between commodities and securities, but the importance of this asset class being embedded in the United States. In the meantime, then, Alan, the European Union, who has a more embedded regulatory structure, has been courting digital asset businesses to come and home base in the European Union. So it was really helpful, turning again back to Bitcoin 2024, when President Trump said, I want this industry in the United States. I want Bitcoin mined in the United States. I want the US to be what he called the crypto capital of the world. So we have sort of a mission that the president has laid out for all of us. And now we have to figure out how best to accomplish that mission.
I appreciate all the background there, Senator. Definitely agree with you on so many points. I mean, obviously the previous administration, I mean, they were going after the privacy advocates in our industry. They were going after and debanking a lot of startups within our industry, which crypto czar David Zacks talked extensively about. And I think Mark Andreessen more recently over at A16Z also highlighted that as well. But
Yeah, it's been helpful, Alan. When I got to say, when Mark Andreessen went on Rogan over
yeah,
Thanksgiving and talked about how extensive debanking was, that helped open the floodgates for an open conversation. Some people had been reluctant to talk about it prior to that.
well, it was super eye-opening for me in the sense that like all those things, I guess just because we're in the industry, we've been paying we had a hyper focus on those types of things that were occurring. And I didn't realize until Mark had brought it up how much the general public was just unaware that that was going on.
That's right. And general public, including how extensive it was, and members of Congress were unaware of how extensive it was. Now, those of us who spent a lot of time around digital assets knew that people were being debanked. We knew that the FDIC had taken a pause after being told in 2019 to stop discriminating against digital asset businesses. They settled a lawsuit. They said we won't do it again in 2019. And then, of course, when the Biden administration got back in, the Biden White House and Marty Greenberg over at the FDIC started right back at it, placing a pause on banks that wanted to engage in digital assets. The same thing was occurring at the Fed. The Fed's bank supervision function was being used to make sure that anybody who was trying to get a bank account for a digital asset business or banks that wanted to engage in banking companies that dealt in digital assets were the banks were assassinated and the customers were debanked, and it was in massive numbers. And then they were also attacking their political enemies. Melania Trump was debanked. She was at Signature Bank. The Winklevosses were debanked. They were at Signature. So Gemini was debanked. And the list goes on and on. They literally assassinated a bank called Silvergate that was banking digital assets. That bank was solvent. It was never insolvent. When a run was started on that bank that was caused by that Silicon Valley Bank debacle, they fulfilled every single request to have their deposits returned. That bank was never insolvent. The federal government assassinated that bank. So it just created this giant freeze for this industry that it was caused by the government. Absolutely sinister behavior by the government. So we're having hearings now. We've had one in the Senate Banking Committee. And then the Digital Asset Committee is going to do a series of hearings that are specifically focused on debanking of the digital asset community. We've got to expose this so it doesn't happen again. And then pass statutes that will prevent it from happening again.
Absolutely. Well, I was unaware about the situation with Melania, and just I guess further backs up Trump's, you know, switch from being anti-Bitcoin a couple of years ago to now being one of the biggest supporters, the biggest, the first outside of the great Nayib Bukele, but here in the U.S. the first America's first Bitcoin president, which is super exciting. Um, I mean, the in comparison to the last administration, I mean, it's incredibly obvious how pro Bitcoin they are. Trump's obviously vocal about it. We know Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has Bitcoin. We know Howard Lutnick has Bitcoin. Obviously, the one and only great Senator Cynthia Lummis. You've been our staunch supporter since day one. The original movement maker on everything here. And in addition to that, I think. I think all the signs are pointing towards the inevitable passing of the Bitcoin Reserve proposal. I know you mentioned that there are some hurdles in place. Um, just curious from your perspective, if it comes to it, I know Trump has not hesitated to use executive action to push some things through. Is there a possibility where, if Congress resists the Bitcoin Reserve proposal, do you see a path where the president could enact some form of Bitcoin policy through executive action?
I think the White House is researching that right now to try and understand the extent of their abilities to take existing government assets that are denominated in US dollars and convert them to Bitcoin. I think just intuitively that he probably has some of those powers. Now, what we're starting with is the federal government through the U.S. Marshal Service holds Bitcoin that were held in the asset forfeiture accounts. So they were involved in criminal activity, perhaps as early as the Silk Road matter, and held by the U.S. Marshal Service. We think those should be transferred over to the U.S. Treasury. So we'll be working with Secretary Bessent on that. Then we would like to see those held at Treasury and become the basis for a strategic Bitcoin reserve. There's about 200,000 Bitcoin. We need to better break those down to understand how many of those assets are fully within the federal government's long-term control and how many of them are in some sort of a limbo status due to their asset forfeiture status. Then we want to try and help figure out whether the gold certificates, now this isn't hard gold, physical gold, these are gold certificates, whether they could be brought up to current fair market value. They're currently held on the U.S. government's books at their 1974 value. So bring them up to current fair market value and then sell them into Bitcoin. There again, helping fund the initial Bitcoin strategic reserve. So we're doing some of that research in my office. We're working with other players in the White House that surround the president to see if legally that is possible. The other thing, Alan, that I would mention, and I think it's more typical of the way things are apt to happen going forward, are that the states are looking at strategic Bitcoin reserves. You've got Pennsylvania, Texas, I think Wisconsin, and other states whose legislatures are in session now considering founding a strategic Bitcoin reserve. We've also got other countries, as you know. The United Arab Emirates are looking at it, and other countries. So that helps as well. States tend to be leading indicators to the federal government of what's possible. States tend to be incubators of innovation. And so I'm delighted to see the states moving forward with these ideas, and I'm very hopeful that Bitcoiners who see the merits of a strategic Bitcoin reserve, who are in those states that are working on this, will engage with their state legislators about this and see if we can get a state to be a first adopter.
Yeah, I would love to see it. I know certainly all the mental models of game theory that Bitcoiners have been destroyed. I mean, which traditionally been a grassroots movement is now just coming in at all angles of attack, which is great to see. Whether that's the Emirates looking to place Bitcoin into their sovereign wealth fund, or us placing it into our own strategic reserve, or even the states. It's exciting. You've certainly been an inspiration to many Bitcoiners, and so I appreciate all your transparency through the entire process. I know we're at time here, but if you have a minute or two to spare, let's just fast forward real quick to end of May. It's Bitcoin 2025. What does the conversation look like?
Well, I think it's very positive. I think that we will by then have been able to shine a light on Chokepoint 2.0. We'll know where it was coming from the banks themselves versus where it was coming from the government. And we'll be able to begin to tamp down on that. So people will be less afraid to bank Bitcoin businesses and other digital assets. We'll be in a position to talk about, hopefully by then, a state that has passed authorization for a strategic Bitcoin reserve and learn from them how it's coming along. We may be able to see leaders from other countries talk about their strategic Bitcoin reserve. We may have modeling that has proven a little more the test of time to show what we can expect from a strategic Bitcoin reserve. We're seeing people um, that have been longtime economists of my vintage, Alan, um, bring Bitcoin to baby boomers and help them understand that this is for real. So we're going to see more of that as well. So I expect it to be a very positive, enthusiastic report. And we're going to start talking about what is instead of what may be. And we'll have some actual um, uh, test cases that can move forward to prove that this asset is digital gold, that this brings freedom, and that it can be used to undergird the US dollar. I think a lot of people in government are threatened by the fact that this is an asset the government can't control. The important thing about Bitcoin is it's an asset that can protect the US dollar as the world reserve currency. It's an asset that can help us retire our debt over time. So my generation doesn't saddle your generation with the debt we ran up. So we have a plan not only to match spending with with the revenue we take in, so we can quit creating more debt, but actually we can use Bitcoin held over time and growing in value to retire that debt. So these kinds of discussions, I expect to hear more fleshed out at Bitcoin 2025, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I can't echo enough. Moving from what could be to what is, that's the perfect way to put it. Well, Senator Lummis, I know we're at time. Um, Appreciate you coming on today and giving us all these insights. Looking forward to chatting with you again in the near future, hopefully at Bitcoin 2025.
It'll be my pleasure, Alan. Take care until then.